Hi everybody, it's Steven from Asian Boss. Let me ask you something. Can you imagine what it's like not to have access to clean water? What would your life look like? What if I told you that this is the harsh reality that over 500 million people across the globe, including various parts of Africa and Asia, experience each and every day? Well, there's a man who's dedicated over the past 13 years of his life fighting to solve this problem and in the process completely reinventing charity. His name is Scott Harrison, and he's the founder and CEO of the nonprofit Charity Water. We had the honor of sitting down with Scott for a chat during his recent visit to Seoul, and we would love to share his inspiring story with you guys. If you, like us, are passionate about solving major social problems and are curious as to how just one person can make a global impact, you're in for a real treat. Let's get straight to it. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Let me just start by saying that I saw your presentation, I think back in 2012.
Okay.
To me, that was the greatest keynote speech that I've seen by far. And I've seen, like, obviously Steve Jobs,
Thanks,
iPhone introduction and things like that. So
cool, thank you.
I truly believe in what you do. But in Asia, I'd imagine that not many people are familiar with you or your brand, Charity Water. Could you just briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. So I lead an organization called Charity Water. We're based in New York City, but we work globally across 29 countries. And our mission is to bring clean and safe drinking water to every human being on Earth. There are about 660 million people, as we sit here having a conversation, who are drinking unsafe, dirty, contaminated water today. And our mission is to bring that number to zero. We just think everybody alive should have access to clean and safe drinking water. So over the last 13 years, we've built a brand. I thank you for calling it that. We've been very intentional about that and tried to do things really different in the charity space. We've raised close to $500 million from millions of supporters around the world. It's really been a grassroots effort, and we've helped about 10 million people get clean water out of the 660 million. So a lot of work to be done. We're at the very beginning of the journey. But it's an amazing thing to wake up every day and help people get clean water. That's the job.
After everything you've done, do you still think we'll see these extreme cases?
Oh, it's happening right now. Oh, children are dying right now of diarrhea. They're dying in their mother's arms of dehydration because you know what cures diarrhea? Clean water.
People might hear that word, like clean water or dirty water.
Yeah.
And they just might think, oh, dirty water,
like brown, viscous water. Water that when we put under a microscope is crawling with microbes. Kids drinking, what looks more like chocolate milk from a river and then vomiting on their shirts. And then drinking some more and then vomiting and then drinking some more and vomiting. If you are in a cycle of bad water, it just leads to death for children. It's the kids under 5, they're really the most vulnerable. I was with a woman in Niger once who lost 8 children. She buried 8 of her children. 2 of them survived. So she went 2 for 10, all at different ages, and she was drinking some of the worst water I've ever seen in my life.
Maybe I was just hoping to hear that because of what you've done, at least the severity of these
for 10 million people. For 10 million people, for sure.
Yeah, but even the rest, I was hoping to hear that maybe the severity of the water crisis has lessened.
No, and you could have 5 villages where Charity Water has helped, and you could go 3 villages over and get a story like this. So that's why it's so important that we keep spreading the impact.
Is it mainly African countries or is Asia?
2/3 of the people live in Africa, the rest live in India and Southeast Asia. Women walking 8 hours to these sources, as if it's not bad enough to drink brown, viscous river water. Often the water is so far away in the dry season, in droughts, that the women are walking often at risk of rape, on these long walks far away from their family or their husbands, at risk of hyena attack, at risk of being attacked by lions. How many people think about, oh, I'm going to go out and get my water today and be attacked by a lion? Because a lion's sharing the same water source. You're drinking with the animals. The real stuff that kills you is what you can't see. It's actually not the dirt. It's the microbes, it's the disease in the water, the viruses, it's the fecal contamination. It's the animals that are defecating, and then when that defecation runs into the swamp or into the river, that's what's killing the kids. That's what you die of from diarrhea.
So when they see that water, intuitively, they must know that this is not drinkable, but they drink it anyway.
That's all they have. What else are you gonna do? If you don't drink water, you die. And it's the water that their parents drank. And it's the water that their great-grandparents drank.
A lot of people might look at you and be very cynical. Like, oh, here's like this good-looking white guy from New York.
So what's his deal? What's he in this for? Yeah.
How did you get started in this whole thing?
I was a nightclub promoter for 10 years. So this was, I guess this is my second act in life. My first act was moving to New York City at 18, wanting to have sex, do drugs, and be famous. And wound up working at 40 different nightclubs at the high end, you know, selling $1,000 bottles of champagne, $500 bottles of vodka, catering to celebrities and models and actors and musicians and throwing these big fashion parties. You know, really thinking that's what mattered. It was the watch I was wearing, it was the car I was driving, it was the people that I was seen with, and I partied for a decade, really. Didn't care about anyone else, didn't give to charity, didn't volunteer. It was all about me. It was a life of pure hedonism, and I'm sure you don't know anyone like that, right? None of us know anyone stuck in that pattern, but it was the reality for me for 10 years, and it needed to play out until its end.
So at the time, you just had no awareness of this issue about the water at all, right?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, I could tell you about a vintage of champagne more than I could tell you anything about international humanitarian needs of the world.
So a lot of people will think that that's a very glamorous lifestyle.
Yeah, and it looks glamorous, and you know, for a while it was fun, and then I think the banality sets in of you're effectively having the same conversations with the same people. It's a group of people who are really looking to escape their lives. They're looking to hook up. It's not a place where you find meaningful relationships, meaningful friendships. You know, not much good happens between 12 and 4 a.m. With a lot of alcohol and drugs involved.
Did you slowly feel like you're just hitting the rock bottom?
I think numb would probably be a better description. You know, over time, you feel less. The more drugs you do, the more alcohol you do, the more of the same, you know, boring conversations you have, you become numb. And actually, this led 10 years to a moment of physical numbness. I remember waking up one day and I couldn't feel half my body go, but I remember running my hand under boiling hot water and I couldn't feel anything. Well, no one knows. I went to, you know, a bunch of doctors, and I had MRIs and CT scans, and you know, they attached the EKG stuff, and they couldn't find anything wrong with me. Could have been the drugs, could have been, you know, smoking 2 packs a day, could have been sleeping crazy hours and taking Ambien and, you know, all uppers and downers. But I think that health scare, or just health uncertainty, led to maybe the first period of soul searching in 10 years. And I thought, well, what if I died? What if I had some terrible brain tumor or disease? And what would my life stand for? What would be written on my tombstone?
Yeah.
You know, here lies a guy who's gotten 1 million people drunk and, you know, drugged. And I just realized that there would be no legacy. I would just be completely forgotten. And I'd been brought up in a very different way. I'd been brought up in a very conservative Christian household. I was an only child. I was a caregiver for my mom, who was really sick growing up. So the nightclubs was actually an act of rebellion against the rules-based, you know, religion. And I realized that I was emotionally bankrupt, I was spiritually bankrupt, I was morally bankrupt. My whole life was just to serve myself. I was rotting inside, and I needed to do something different, but I wasn't sure what that looked like.
Right.
And I just got out of town for a couple weeks. I remember renting a car, having no idea where I was going, and just driving this blue Ford Mustang north. That north was where I was going. I wound up in a town called Maine in the Northeast, and I was on this lake, and I just got the idea to go into an internet cafe and start applying to volunteer at a humanitarian organization for 1 year.
So nobody told you to do that?
No, and I was praying. I was trying to find my way back to faith and morality, and, you know, trying to rediscover maybe, you know, the faith that had been given to me by my parents, which I had rejected. But so many of those principles, you know, the idea of God or even a relationship was really interesting to me as an adult, having been through the opposite of all that. You know, I've really been through hell. So, yeah, I asked the question, what would the opposite of my life look like? And opposite felt like serving the poor. Go leave New York,
Yeah.
give up the apartment and get rid of the piano and the car and all that stuff and go serve. So it turned out that this was very difficult because from that internet cafe, I put in a bunch of applications to the Peace Corps and I don't know, UNICEF, Doctors Without Borders, like any big organization that I'd heard of. And then the rejection letters came back. One organization finally wrote me back and said, we'll take you under these conditions, pay us $500 a month, which was one of the ways that the organization helped raise money from its volunteers, and go to Liberia, West Africa, which I'd never heard of at the time. I mean, if you'd said Liberia, I wouldn't have said it was a country. It was actually, at the time, interestingly, the poorest country in the world. It had just finished a 14-year civil war.
Yeah.
A terrible guy named Charles Taylor had led children. He put guns and drugs in the hands of and mouths of kids, and he forced them to kill.
Yeah.
And the country had thrown Taylor out. He'd fled to Nigeria, and 14,000 United Nations peacekeepers descended to pick up the pieces. And my mission, the mission that I had accepted, was a group of humanitarian doctors and surgeons who were going to go in and offer free health care to a country that hadn't had health care for a decade and a half.
Yeah.
And I was going to be the documentarian. I was going to be the photojournalist that would take the pictures, film videos, and write stories about the important medical work they were doing. Wow. So, life changed really dramatically. I resolved to quit smoking and quit drugs, once and for all, and quit gambling and, swear off pornography and just like all the vices that I'd been maybe trapped in for so long. And then join this medical mission and sail on a hospital ship. It was a giant 522-foot hospital ship into Liberia with these doctors.
Yeah.
And I couldn't have been prepared for what I saw. I saw leprosy, I saw cleft lips and cleft palates, I saw tumors, I saw flesh-eating disease, I saw kids that had been burned by rebels who poured hot oil on their faces to disfigure them during the war. When our doctors would screen for patients, we would do a big casting call. And the government would give us a stadium and say, hey, take our football or soccer arena in the center of town, and 5,000 people would turn out, sick people.
And how many people?
Yeah, we could help.
on your
We
side?
could help 1,500.
Right.
So we would turn away thousands of people because we didn't have enough resources. There weren't enough doctors. There wasn't enough money.
When you see these type of things you've never seen in your life, was it tough for you emotionally? Feels
Yeah,
like?
I cried a lot. I mean, I just remember being, in a puddle of ugly tears a bunch of times, just, this close to someone who's dying. There were patients that we had to send home with no hope. So you would come to a patient screening and, hundreds of people with these giant tumors, right? Tumors that would grow here, but the minute something starts growing in your face, you're straight into the hospital. They just cut it off and it's done. Mm. But if there's no hospital to go to, some of these tumors were the size of basketballs. I remember the first day I was there, there's a little boy named Seraphin, and he had this tumor that was out to here, and we biopsied them all, and it was malignant, so we couldn't operate. And we just sent him home, basically to die. And there was no palliative care system. I mean, this is literally a boy that in front of his parents is just gonna suffocate to death on his face until he can't breathe or eat anymore. And we weren't able to help him. So it was hard. So that kind of stuff, sends you into a dark room.
Yeah.
And then you pick yourself up and you focus on the hope. And we were able to help 1,500 people on that first mission. And I was lucky enough to document all 1,500 people pre-surgery, so for the medical library, pre-intervention. And then I got to document 1,500 people after we'd helped them.
I'm assuming there were a lot of doctors that were volunteering as well, right?
Everybody. Yeah, everybody was there. Were about 350 people on the whole ship, from doctors to nurses to dentists to cataract surgeons.
And I would have thought that smart bunch of people like that, like doctors, wouldn't they start to question what's causing all this?
Yeah, I wound up asking, well, why is everybody sick? And I wound up getting off the ship, going into the rural areas. A year turned into 2, so I finished 1 year, signed up for a second year because I just wasn't sure what was next, and I was so in love with the work. And being around these doctors, it was an inspirational place. It was difficult, but it was also, on balance, way more hopeful. And as I would go into the villages, I would see people drinking from swamps and from ponds and from rivers. And I just never seen humans drink disgusting water before.
So you're saying that there's a direct correlation between dirty water and people
Well, here's what I
growing
learned.
tumors like
Yeah,
suicide?
here's what I learned. I learned that 50% of the country was drinking dirty, unsafe, contaminated water. And I learned that 50% of the disease in countries like Liberia, said the World Health Organization, is caused by bad water and a lack of sanitation. The big takeaway was you got a couple million people living without clean water.
Wow.
And you got this huge expensive operation on a ship with hundreds of people in operating theaters and 42-bed hospital ward. And we're only going to help a couple thousand people.
Yeah.
So let's go to the root cause of what we know so much of the sickness is, and that's what I wanted to work on. And I shared that idea with the chief medical officer who'd been there 20-some years. And I said, I think I'm going to go work on what. And I remember he encouraged me. He said, if you really cared about global health, the number one thing you'd do, you'd help people get clean water.
In Africa, were there any people whose lives that you've seen and you're like, wow, I've really touched these people's lives?
It's a story from Ethiopia. And I learned that there was a 13-year-old girl that was walking for water 8 hours. She had this heavy clay pot that she would carry on her back, and it would arch her spine. And at the end of one of these journeys, she slipped, she fell, the pot just carelessly slipped on a rock or something. The clay pot broke, all the water spilled out. And she was so sad, so overcome with despair that she hung herself from a tree in the village. She did not pick up the pieces of the pot. She did not go back for more water. She tied a noose around her neck, she climbed a tree, and she jumped. But it was a story that I wanted to know more about, and I wound up actually living in that village for a week and finding out that it was, every bit of it was true. I walked in her footsteps, saw where she got water, I saw the clay pots.
Wow.
I saw the tree where they found her body. She was a 13-year-old girl. So this was a teenager. I asked her best friend, who actually walked with her that day, who did most of the 8-hour journey with her, and then they forked off and her friend went home and she went towards her home where she slipped and fell. I said, why do you think she would be in such despair that she'd take her life? I mean, this is a 13-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And her friend said shame. She would have been so overcome with shame that she had broken the pot, a valuable asset. She'd spilled the water, which meant her family would now have no water for dinner, and she just couldn't face them. And I mean, I just remember being so angry.
Yeah.
That I live in a world where a child can stumble and fall and be in conditions of such despair that a child would take their own life. It made me want to go faster, it made me want to help more people, not on my watch, not if we can do anything about it.
So knowing all this, knowing that so many people are just dying from drinking this undrinkable water, like, what do you do?
You started an organization. So yeah, I mean, I spent 2 years in Liberia volunteering. I'd gotten rid of the smoking and the drinking and the drugs and all that, and I came back to New York City at 30 and said, there was a responsibility to do something about what I'd seen. At that moment, there was no money, there were no resources.
Yeah.
It was just an idea. And I was living on a closet floor at the time.
I was gonna ask, like, you left all that lifestyle behind. What happened to your apartment, all your expensive stuff?
Yeah, I gave all the money I had to mercy ships and the people I met, and I didn't save. Nightclub promoters, whatever we made, we spent a little more. So such a fast lifestyle. We were just at the bleeding edge. Yeah. So I coming back from Africa, I mean, this was actually really healthy, I think, because it was a really zero starting place. And my old club partner took me in, said, you can sleep on the closet floor, you can use my couch for your cute little charity idea. That's nice. You kind of would pet me. And when are you coming back to the clubs? I need help. Yeah. So I said, I'm not coming back to the clubs. And I had the advantage of being naive, being passionate, because I'd just come back from Africa and I wanted to make a big difference. And I was just talking to everyday people about the idea, about charity, about giving. And I realized most of my friends weren't really giving, kind of like I hadn't been for 10 years. They were cynical, they were skeptical. Yeah. They said, I don't trust charities. I don't know where my money would go. I don't even believe that if I gave money, it would get to the people that need it.
I think that's what people still say.
Still, to this day. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I wondered, how we could fix that. How could we solve for that? What kind of business model might speak to those objections? What might win the skeptic or the cynic? What might, because I really believed, well, it was true from my experience, I had been missing out by not giving for 10 years, by only giving to myself. I had been living a purposeless life. So I actually thought that people were doing themselves harm, doing themselves damage by not being generous, by not finding important work of service to engage in.
Yeah.
So the big idea was, could we just create a business model at the charity where 100% of every donation would go directly to help people get clean water?
Yeah.
I opened up 2 bank accounts because it sounded like a good idea, and said, I'm going to raise the overhead separately from a very small group of people, hopefully business leaders or entrepreneurs who wouldn't mind paying for the unsexy staff and office and copy machine and insurance and phone bill costs.
Because you wanted 100% go to...
So that 100% of anyone, giving from the public, whether they gave, I don't know, 1,000 won or 1 million or, 500,000 euros or 50 euros, all of that money could go directly to the projects, to water projects. And then, realizing that if we held these two bank accounts separately, we could actually use technology to track those donations.
Correct.
Because they were whole donations. We weren't stepping in them. They weren't fungible. They weren't going into a giant pot. So we could actually track them through to the origin and show people, hey, you only gave $30, but here's where your money went. So that was really such a big and revolutionary idea at the time that it began to resonate.
Yeah.
And donations started coming in. And I would be out there making speeches, showing the photos that I'd taken in Liberia. I was putting exhibitions together. We were making PSAs to run online, to run on even network television. We were getting donated media.
But it sounds like because you already had that almost like
the promotion,
the network already of influential people in New York on your guest
Yeah.
list. Is that something that you utilized?
I did, but I will say they weren't really the givers. So I wound up finding a whole new set of givers. It wasn't the nightclub owners that were the supporters. It
Right.
wasn't the people who were going out buying bottles at 2 a.m. Who were the ones buying wells. I think probably what was more useful was what I learned over those 10 years, which was promotion,
Right.
which was storytelling, which was design and branding excellence, working at some of the nicest places. You're around real talent. You're around creative talent.
Wow. So what was your first event that you
First
ever
event
put
was at a
together?
nightclub. It was a party at a nightclub. It was on my 31st birthday, and I rallied 700 people. I lured them there by giving them open bar.
Yeah.
And to get in the club that night, they had to make a $20 donation. And I made the 100% promise. I said, whatever is in this big plexi box at the end of night, 100% of the money is going to go to northern Uganda, to a refugee camp, and we're going to give as many people clean water as we can. And that night we raised $15,000. And I remember, I can't say this everywhere, but I think I can with you, there was a drug dealer that came that night, and he gave $500. And he said, this is the first charitable gift I have ever given in my life. So we raised $15,000. We took 100% of the money like a month later to northern Uganda.
Yeah.
And we built 3 wells, we fixed 3 wells, and then we sent the photos and the GPS coordinates back to all the 700 people. We said, you did this. You came to a party, you gave a little bit of money, and here's the result of that money at work. It's changing people's lives. Women and girls are now drinking clean water. Here they are.
That's cool.
And that closed loop was just so powerful. People
Yeah.
said, I never expected to hear from you again. It was only $20. Can we do it again? When's the next event? How do we bring our friends? How do we get people involved?
Wow.
And it just started to grow organically.
The first event was a huge success.
Yep.
After that, what happened?
We did a lot of in-person events, gallery exhibitions. We went to Sundance. We did this pretty cool exhibition in New York City where I got a bunch of MTV, this dates it, MTV set builders to build this giant 4-walled moving exhibition. And we built plexi tanks, and we put dirty water from New York City ponds and rivers inside the tanks. And we juxtaposed it with the photos that I'd taken of people around the world. I said, would you drink this? Would you drink this?
Wow.
Would you drink your local swamp? In the middle, the response was this bottled water that I had created. with a black label. There were 6 different labels, and they all had facts about death and disease and dying from bad water. And I said, buy this bottle of water for $20. Costs us 20 cents to produce it.
Right.
And all $20 will go directly to help people get clean water. And we raised $19,000 for that exhibition. So it's just all these mini activities, a $15,000 party, a $19,000 exhibition. I think we raised $22,000 at Sundance.
Wow.
A year later, we took it online. And that was really a big breakthrough where I got this idea to ask people to donate their birthdays.
How did you get that idea?
Well, because I launched Charity Water on my birthday
Right.
in a nightclub. So nightclub promoters, we milk our birthdays. It's just the one night at the club where everybody knows it's going to be a good party if it's the nightclub promoter's birthday because the DJ is going to be great and they're just going to hit the phones and they're going to call in all the favors.
Yeah.
So a year later, I said, well, I've effectively been doing birthday parties for money for years. Last year, I did a birthday party, raised $15,000 for Charity Water, day one. What if I skipped the birthday party altogether, but I still did something around my birthday? And I thought the sticky marketing hook would be to ask for my age in dollars. Because surely everyone I knew had $32.
Sure.
Right? If they came to the club, they would tip that much.
Yeah.
Right? Or coming and going in a taxi and tipping even for free drinks would be more than $32. So I just said, hey, the party's off. I don't need any party. I don't need any gifts. Donate $32 for my 32nd birthday. And I promised that if I raised, I think it was $40,000, we had this big project. It was a hospital without water in Kenya. I said, if we raise this money by my birthday, because I started the campaign like 2 weeks before, I said, I will fly to this health clinic with a satellite camera and I will drill the well live for everybody that gives $32 and you can see where your money goes in real time. I raised $59,000.
Whoa.
So flew over to Kenya.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. It took us 3 days, so we did 3 days of broadcasts.
Yeah.
And all the people were connected to this health clinic, a place called Mogotio, where dirty water was running through the taps. And they got to see clean water flowing at the health clinic.
Yeah.
And that just led to the idea, well, okay, I'm not the only one with a birthday. I'm not the only one that doesn't need a party or more crap. What if, and everybody has a birthday, and people of different ages could ask for different dollar amounts. So right away, this 7-year-old kid joined the campaign, and he just asked for $7, and he raised $22,000. And then an 89-year-old that month joined the campaign, and she wrote this beautiful mission statement. And we are hand coding these donation pages, writing the HTML, putting a PayPal button on it. I mean, this is as analog as it gets.
I was going to
say.
So
you would donate your birthday. You would send me a picture.
Yeah.
And over a series of like 5 emails, you would write a mission statement, and then I would code a page, right? And it would have your age, and then people would be able to donate and leave a message. But it was all manual.
So, okay, you're getting, at least at this point, tens of thousands of dollars, right?
Yeah, the goal for that came was it was $150,000.
Yeah. And then you're still by yourself? At that time, you have a team now.
We had 2 people.
Just 2 people?
Yeah. Because I've got to raise the overhead separately. So I would raise a few months of salary for somebody, and then I would hire them on faith that the thing would work.
So then you guys are handling this overwhelming demand because you found an idea that scaled, and like you guys are kind of doing that. But I could imagine that you just can't keep up with it, right?
So we had our first kind of moment of calamity or existential crisis about 2.5 years in. We'd raised a few $1 million. So just out of the gate, maybe $4 million. Most of it for the water projects, which was the easy value proposition, right? 100% of your money goes. And we were doing a good job at proving these water projects so people could see where the money was going. And we had this moment where we ran out of money in the overhead side. So even to this day, there's a water bank account and an overhead bank account. Yeah. Separate bank account numbers, audited separately.
Yeah.
So in the water bank account, there was $881,000. And we were about to miss payroll in the other bank account. And we were going to have to shut down because we couldn't use any of the water money to pay our team of 9 or 10 at the time. And it was interesting. The advice I was getting at the time was to compromise, to borrow against the $881,000, write an IOU, money's fungible. You got to pay your you got to pay your staff. I mean, right? Every kind of reason why you could rationalize that. And I'm an extreme person. I'm like, we made the promise, if we borrow 1 penny from the public's money, we've compromised our integrity, there's a crack at the foundation, we should just quit. And you know, I'm a person of faith, even though the organization is not religious at all. And I was praying like crazy. I'm like, God, I need a miracle. Need a miracle. Like, Charity Water is not supposed to just end 2.5 years in after. In fact, like, we're almost a victim of our success. The business model was so effective that we were raising millions of dollars. And you know, I started talking to lawyers about how to shut the organization down. We had a few weeks left.
Wow.
And believe it or not, a complete stranger walked in the office. I had written this guy a cold email 6 months prior, actually about something unrelated to money, about the birthday idea. He had a social network that was kind of third to Facebook and MySpace at the time, a network called Bebo. And I said, will you help me spread the birthday idea on Bebo? And he wrote me back and said, I like your idea, but I can't help you. Well, at this time of crisis, when we were about to go bankrupt, he writes me, he says, hey, I'm going to be in New York, I'd like to meet you. And we have a 2-hour meeting. Yeah. I don't think he likes me because he's cynical, he's British, he's not smiling. And then he leaves the meeting, you know, kind of, let me think about whether I can help. And then 2 days later, he wires $1 million into our overhead account.
Whoa.
So we go from illiquid, insolvent,
Yeah.
to having 13 months of capital,
Right.
of payroll.
Oh,
And he said, I
so relate to that.
He said, I love what you're doing, you need more time. I believe in you. And that's what we needed. We needed more time to then work on the other side. So we built what's now, you know, a pretty sophisticated multi-year, multi-tier program. We call it The Well. And there are 135 entrepreneurs, business leaders, and families that pay for all the overhead, allowing millions of people to give in a pure way.
Wow. Yeah. When you say that the people start donating birthdays, was there any like memorable ones? That
I mean, it spread through Silicon Valley. So Jack Dorsey did 3 birthdays. Angela Ahrens at Apple donated her birthday. Then it spread to Hollywood. Will Smith was a big one. Will and Jada both donated their birthdays and then came with me to Ethiopia to make videos for their fans so they could show them the impact of the donations. The real money, though, was raised by the everyday people that were not rich, that were not famous, that were not running companies. All in all, that birthday idea raised over $75 million. Birthdays, and then other people just doing fundraising campaigns. Wow. So some people would come across the birthday idea, say, well, my birthday's not for 10 months, I'm going to do something else.
Like what?
Climb a mountain and try to raise $1 a foot. So the idea of like, there was always a sticky gimmick to all of them. I'm going to sail across the Atlantic Ocean in awareness of water. We had a guy, do you know the band Nickelback?
Yes.
You ever heard of them?
Of
Okay,
course.
so there's a guy in Atlanta, and he said, I hate Nickelback. So I'm going to listen to Nickelback for 7 days straight, and I'm going to go to bed with headphones with Nickelback blaring. It was a Nickelback campaign. He raised $32,000.
Oh my God. Okay.
As people just felt sorry for him, you know, going through the whole catalog 7 days straight. So, you know, I would have never thought of that. 5-year-old girls painting for Charity Water. 6-year-olds doing 12 lemonade stands, you know, 12 weeks in a row. So this whole, you know, community of birthday fundraisers, of creative fundraisers, just started exploding. There was a remarkable story, a girl in Seattle named Rachel Beckwith, and she was turning 9, donated her 9th birthday, set a fundraising goal of $300, which today would get 10 people clean water. And she fell short. So she worked hard, she canceled her birthday party, she didn't accept gifts, and she raised $220. She was bummed, and I remember, you know, as we learned the story, she told her mom she felt like she had let people down, and she would try harder next year. Right after her Charity Water campaign, she's killed in a car crash. There was a horrible tractor trailer derailed on the highway, 20-car pileup. Her mom was driving, her single mom. Her sister was in the front, she was in the back, and the tractor trailer came down on the back of the car. She was the only death. And, you know, word spread that right before her death, she had run this campaign that her last wish was that kids she'd never met, a world away, would get access to clean water. And she went to a small church, the pastor said, I'm going to just have everybody in my church give $9 in her honor. And that started happening. And then it spread to the Seattle community. And then it spread across the country. And then it spread to Europe, spread to Asia, spread down to Africa. And this global movement of tens of thousands of people just started donating $9, $9, $9, $9. She raised over $1.3 million.
Wow, that's amazing.
From her vision, helped over 37,000 people. So I got to take another cool part of the story. Exactly a year later, I invited her mom and her grandparents on the day, the anniversary of her death, to come with me to Ethiopia, where her projects were built, and go village to village to village to village and meet some of the 37,000 people that she'd helped. And it was an incredibly moving experience. So death of children is very common in Ethiopia and in lots of the places where we work. And in one of the villages, Samantha was Rachel's mom's name, and she comes into a village and the elders fall down at her feet and just start weeping, like kissing her feet. And we've got translators, and the elderly woman says, we know your pain. We have lost our children too, but your daughter's death brought our children life. And it was just so beautiful, watching these two mothers connect over grief, but knowing that at least through this tragedy, 37,000 people. I mean, that's stadiums. It's like 2 stadiums full of people for a concert because of the vision, because of the sacrifice, and it's a counterintuitive thing. 9-year-olds are supposed to want presents. 9-year-olds are supposed to want parties. It's us mature adults that are supposed to be the givers, right? So I lost my mom last year to pancreatic cancer, and it's a bad cancer. They just don't know what to do about it. 90% of people just die. Water's not like that. Now, hopefully we do find a cure for pancreatic cancer. We may or may not, and all these other intractable diseases. But water is 100% curable all the time. So of the 663 million people alive, there's no one that we couldn't just help right now. Now, we haven't created the awareness to do it. We haven't built the movement. We haven't moved enough people from apathy to action or giving or generosity, but we know how to do it. So that's what I think, 13 years later, keeps the team energized, because we know how to do this, so let's go do it.
You're not satisfied, and I can see we still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
And so from this point onward, how do you actually scale even more?
2 years ago, we grew 40%. The next year we grew 40%, last year we grew 30%. So we're actually in a period of hyper acceleration in a declining or flat giving sector. So over those 3 years, giving is just flat. So we're not riding any sort of wave of water giving or generosity globally. We pivoted to subscription. So we actually moved. The birthdays were great, but from a business model approach or from an entrepreneur's approach, it actually wasn't great because people only did one.
Correct.
You're one and done with us. You do your birthday, and that's great, and you have a great experience, and you might raise $10,000 for a well and feel great about it and get to see your well, but it's very hard to get you to do it again. Sometimes you'll adopt the idea, and the next year you'll do a birthday for hunger, or a justice issue, or education. But you weren't continuing to stick with us. So we thought about the business we really admired, the Netflixes, the Spotifys of the world. They acquired a supporter or a customer, and then they kept them for many, many years.
That's right.
So about 3 years ago, we developed a new community called The Spring, and we said, let's just ask people to give every month. Let's actually just be straight with people and say, we're trying to grow this. We don't want you to give once. We want you to give as long as you can, and just show up every month in the same way you're showing up for Dropbox or Netflix or a magazine. Hopefully 5 years from now and 10 years from now, you look back and you're like, wow, I gave a lot of money. Yeah. That added up. That was a lot of impact. And we even pay back the credit card fees incurred. So if you're giving $100 a month and you happen to use your Amex, we get 97. We would actually make up that $3, the 3%, and send the whole $100. So I think it's a pretty clean value proposition. The average person has 11 subscriptions today. So this is just something that we know. We do subscribe to a lot of things. Almost all those things give us value. And we wanted to create a subscription program where 100% of the value was passed on to people who needed water, who didn't have the most basic need met. They didn't need music. They don't need magazines. They don't need, cloud storage. They need clean water.
Right now, what is the best way for people, or what are some of the best ways for people to get clean water?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's no silver bullet. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to the water crisis. Charity Water employs now about 13 different technologies across 20 some countries. We drill a lot of wells. So often in a rural community, this is a terrible irony, you have a community, let's say of 300 people, living off the land, walking hours to a swamp or a river, and they're dying because the water's bad, and they're living on top of a massive aquifer of clean water. It's 50 meters beneath the ground. So what they don't have access to is a $1 million drilling rig. They don't have access to the skilled hydrogeologists, the technicians, the people who can find the water, build the well. So that's what we do. We provide the capital, the human capital. We provide the money for the well. We provide the equipments, the machines, through a network of local partners. And you get these amazing moments, like 3 days later, water shooting up from the ground. And I mean, it seems too simple.
I'm not a scientist, but what I am curious about is basically what's happening around the world.
Yeah.
It looks like we're just in a massive water shortage crisis. So, for example, even in like Jakarta, the capital city of Indonesia, the city as a whole is sinking because I hear that people keep on digging and then just taking the groundwater, as well as the rising sea level, right? So could that basically have like a negative side effect?
It's a great question. If we're drilling a well for a community in Ethiopia, there's so much water under the ground. The amount coming out for drinking water is a fraction of that water.
I see.
In fact, I think it's 85% of the water use in the world is agriculture and industry. It might even be 90%. So the real kind of the criminals in the water use it's the flour factories, it's industry. You know, more water is used to make these jeans than, you know, what 1,000 people will drink in a day. I mean, some of the stats are crazy, like what goes into meat and jeans and cotton production.
How many years is it going to take from now, and how much money do you guys need?
We now have our own goal with the United Nations, Sustainable Development Goal number 6, water. Everybody has clean water by 2030. So 10 years from now, everybody's dropping the mic, 0 people globally. Okay, well the reality is if everything continues at the same trajectory, Charity Water keeps growing, all the other little water charities, we're going to be at 440 million 10 years from now. Progress, but not 0. So scale is needed, you know, a jump step is needed. So we're really trying to, you know, scale. We're trying to raise $1.2 billion in the next 6 years to get the next 25 million people clean water. We've got 10 million behind us. We're trying to go basically twice as fast in half the time. And then we'll try and do it again. You know, once we have 35 million behind us, how do we get the next 65 million people and get to 100 million served?
As far as I'm concerned, this has to be a global movement.
Yes,
which
the awareness has to be there.
Starts with the awareness. The fact that people don't even know about this issue, despite the fact that you've been working so hard, getting stages and just, you know, doing interviews. But how can we just get the message out more?
Through people just learning about it and then telling their friends, posting it, joining. You know, I mean, that's one thing. There's kind of this Slack division now. It's really easy just to share or to tweet and kind of move on. So the beauty of the spring is that we're really trying to develop this community of people who are willing to, you know, put a little bit of money every month where their mouth is, and then become better advocates. When you have a little bit of skin in the game, it's much easier to tell people about what you're doing.
Ultimately, are you happy right now?
Yeah, I love this. I mean, come on, I get to, you know, today over 4,100 people will get clean water for the first time in their life. And then another 4,100 people tomorrow, and it's the weekend. And then another 4,100 people.
And I think it's important for humanity to know that you're okay in terms of, like, you're not at the risk of burning out.
Yeah, no, I've got a beautiful wife and 2 young kids, and I travel too much, but you know, I make a great living, and you know, the 135 donors support me. They support 105 full-time staff in New York. You know, we take stewardship very seriously. We fly coach. You know, Charity Water's never bought a business class ticket for me or for anyone else in the org. We have a beautiful office in New York, but half of it is donated, and you know, we really try to even make those overhead dollars for those families count.
How can people start contributing to Charity Water right now?
Yeah, I think the best place to go is just thespring.com. Yeah. There's a great video there that's also something you can share. It's just that website. It's kind of the video that we made of the first 10 years of Charity Water. You can learn more about the program. You can join in 30 seconds. That's probably the simplest call to action. And we have people giving $10 a month. We have people giving $1,000 a month.
I myself, of course, am a member
Me too.
of the
Thank
Spring
you.
community.
Thank you.
And
Thanks for doing it.
You can rest assured that I'll be telling everybody about it.
Awesome.
And I think even if we get like a few 100,000 views, and if just
Yeah.
a few percentage that convert, that's a huge.
Yeah. Well, we ask people watch the video, and if you're moved, share it and join.
We will be sharing it.
Awesome.
Cool. Thank you so much for your time, Scott.
Thanks for having me. Awesome.
Appreciate it.